question is, how do they do it? How do plants find the food they're looking for, both above the ground and below it, when they have no eyes, no ears, let alone no brain? Well, the feeding habits of this strange snake-like vine may hold the answer. It's called the dodder vine, the Count Dracula of the plant world. The vine has no roots and can't produce its own food, so it lives entirely off a host plant. And it has just 72 hours to find that host, or it dies. Its tiny teeth-like probes pierce the stem and grow into its victim, draining it of its life-giving sap. And this botanical vampire seems to prefer some plants over others. Tomatoes are among its favorite victims. So how does it find its host? And how does it choose between one plant or another? J.C. Cahill has come to Pennsylvania to meet Consuelo de Moraes and Mark Mesher, the scientists who solved that mystery.
So there's a patch here of our species that grows locally.
We brought this plant to the lab, this parasitic plant, Cuscuta dodder. We're looking at how these plants interact, but how do they find the host? And we thought for sure somebody had already done that. And then we went back to the literature, and there was nothing on that.
So what would happen to dodder if it just was really poor in its ability to detect its host?
Well, these guys are obligate parasites, really, so they're completely dependent on the host plant. So a seedling of dodder has to find a host plant within a few days, or they'll exhaust their energy resources and die. So really we expect really intense pressure on these guys to be good at foraging and identifying their host.
But while the dodder vine may be good at finding a victim, could it actually choose between two different host plants? De Moraes and Mesher made it their mission to find out. In a series of experiments, they placed wheat and tomato seedlings in the same pot and planted a newly sprouted dodder vine between them. Then they set up a time-lapse camera to see if the seedling was actually making a choice. For hours, it circles the air like a snake, as if sniffing out its victims. And 9 times out of 10, its preferred victim is the juicy tomato, a tender plant that's easier to attach to.
You really get this sense of a behavior response. So really, there is some fairly strong selection here for this plant to make the right decision, otherwise it will die.
But how was the little stem making its choice? The team decided to play a hunch. They knew that all plants produce green leaf volatiles, chemical scents released by their leaves as they breathe. So maybe this predatory plant actually was sniffing out its victim. To test that theory, the team devised another experiment. First, they captured the scent of a tomato, essentially condensing the chemical odor released by the plant. Once it's distilled, they present the tomato perfume to the vine. Along with a real tomato, it can't possibly smell. Time after time, the dodder hones in on the chemical language that says, "Yes, I'm a tomato."
There's no doubt with the daughter there's choice. There's choice involving a suitable host or non-suitable host. This is a very familiar thing in animal foraging behavior that we're seeing in this plant foraging behavior.
But the dodder isn't the only plant that's exhibiting animal-like behavior. Once it's under full-scale dodder attack, the tomato releases the chemical equivalent of a scream. In fact, many plants emit a chemical SOS when they're under attack, and we've all caught a whiff of it. It's the smell of freshly cut grass.
We all love the smell of freshly cut grass. We all love the smell of flowers that we put into a vase. We all love the smells of plants. But those smells mean one thing to us than they mean to the other individuals in that environment. And we are causing stress. We are causing trauma to these plants. It's the plant's way of calling out for help.
So if it's a cry for help, who or what are plants calling out to? Well, if this unassuming desert plant is any indication, they may be calling in some pretty effective reinforcements. Insects that eat the insects that eat them. The desert isn't the most welcoming place for people, but it can be an ecological nightmare for some plants. Unlike us, plants can't escape the heat or walk for miles to find water, nor can they run and hide when they're attacked by insects. But it's precisely because they can't move that plants have evolved some pretty nifty methods of self-defense.
We used to think, or used to view plants sort of as just sitting there, whatever happens, happens, they make their seeds and they go on. But we're realizing it's much more complex. They're actively engaging with the environment in which they live. They actively communicate, they actively respond to the nutrients and the predators and the herbivores that are around them. It's a really dynamic system. So when you take a look at a plant, and if you were to rip off a leaf, and then think about this from the plant's point of view, what just happened was something came around and ate some of its body. And so this plant that was just damaged by me ripping it off is likely to start changing its defensive chemistry. It can start communicating with its neighbors or insects, and all those processes begin.